Hey, I'm Chris with Palmetto State Armory, and today I'm going to walk you through how to get an ALG AKT inside of your AK-V. Say that 3 times fast. You want to take your old trigger out and you want to put a new one in. Well, specifically, we're going to work with the ALG AKT. AKT for AK trigger. Very creative. We're gonna take the old trigger out, put a new trigger in, right? Well, I'm gonna do the ALG AKT twice. I'll take it out and I'll put it back in. That way all bases are covered and you'll know exactly what you're doing when the time comes to upgrade yours. A couple of tools you're gonna need, including a life hack for you AK fans. We will need some pliers. We'll need a 9/64 punch is what I chose. I think that's the ideal size, but whatever punch you think matches your pins best, but that's what I'm gonna use. And then a hammer, and then I'm going to use a shotgun shell. Got a couple of extras if I need it, but if you have a bread tie or any sort of wire tie that you want to use, that will come in handy here in just a minute. Just so you know, before we get started, when you buy the AKT from ALG, you're going to get these 2 small silver roll pins, and these roll pins are made to help the safety work with certain AK variants on the market. You do not need them with your AK-V. So if you're going through this install and you're looking at these pins and you're thinking, hey, what am I supposed to do with these? On the AK-V, nothing. You don't need them. So just tuck those away somewhere just in case you need a roll pin in the future, but you're not going to need them today. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and pull the safety out, and the way I do that is to actually turn the safety 90 degrees upward, just like that. You can wiggle it a little bit and it should come right out. I'll set that aside. Now I'm going to secure the hammer springs, and here's how I'm going to do that. By putting rearward pressure on the hammer like that, and then really I'm just going to use these needle nose pliers to get in there and put it on the lip like that. I'm going to do the other side as well. Try to be somewhat careful with this, because if you bend these too much, it can cause an issue with your reset or you know, the actual fire control group here. But once we've got our legs crossed like that, it's pretty simple. I'm going to take this empty shotgun shell and just slide it right over it, just like that, okay? And you really just need enough of it on there to secure that. So once I've got it secured, what I like to do is I'll just kind of bend the shotgun shell forward. That whole trigger will move up for me. We'll be good to go. By the way, one thing to take note of is the Mac bracket is going to cause you to need to put a little bit of care into moving that forward. Make sure your hammer springs are fitting between the Mac bracket, not getting caught up on it, causing you any unnecessary issues. The next thing we want to do is pull out our pin keeper. Here's how we're going to do that. The pin keeper sits just on the other side of this hole, all right, and it's helping hold this pin and this pin in place. Let me show you how to get it out. Just inside, you'll see the lip of the pin keeper, and you can use your finger or the pliers, but you just pull that towards the inside of the receiver and up, and then it'll come out of there. All right, so here's what that looks like now. Now it's out, and then I just pull back. There's no resistance there. The way this device works is that when it's installed, it's holding onto this pin forward, onto that pin downward, and lining up with this rear hole. That'll become important again when we put the trigger back in. All right, now I can get my actual trigger and disconnect out. I'm going to do that by using, I have a bag back here, like a bench rest bag. I need enough elevation on the AK-V so that that pin can fall free of the receiver. So I need space, probably, you know, a solid 2 to 3 inches between the receiver and my workbench. And so I'm just going to use a 9/64 punch here. Again, there shouldn't be much resistance here. That pin should just come out and fall free on the other side. You need to be aware that now your disconnector your disconnector spring and your trigger are all going to come out simultaneously. But go ahead and get those removed. Set the gun back upward and look in there and see how it's all coming out. Oh, there's my spring. This is your disconnector spring. This is a spring that'll help with reset. I'll show you what that means for you here in just a couple minutes as we put it back in. We're almost done. Now we're just going to take the actual hammer out. We're going to do it the same way we did the trigger. A couple of light taps. Don't baby it, but you also don't have to be Samson to get that thing out. It'll come right out for you. Let's take a quick look at the actual hammer springs. I think this is one of the most confusing parts for me personally about getting a new trigger in place is which way does the spring go? What's it supposed to look like? So a quick memory by association trick here. There's a little notch here that almost looks like it's pointing in this direction. And right here is where your tension should come from the spring. So you place your spring on like this so that the tension goes like that. And what you're going to do, this is where the bite becomes a thing, is you're actually going to bend the spring around, lay it onto the sear portion of the hammer. Do that again. And remember, keep these in place, all right? You need to hold tension onto these springs so that they don't pop off and bite you. There you go. So you get them that way, you can keep them. And I'm not having to squeeze that, by the way, to hold it in place. It's just my fingers on it are enough. And I'm going to take something, be it my rubber band or twisty tie, I'm going to lock it over that, and then I'm good to go. I'm going to slide it in. And what I want to do is make sure that I squeeze it into the Mac bracket, avoiding pinching the springs and any unnecessary tension there. And then just look down, push that bad boy all the way forward. I'm going to grab that shotgun shell and just stand the whole thing straight up. Now, with your AK platform, the trigger and hammer pin look and function exactly the same. They're built exactly the same. You're not going to mix them up. Use either one. Just keep the two of them ready, and either one can go through the hammer and either one can go through the trigger. It doesn't matter. Let's get our hammer in place first. That is important with the AK-V because it has the Mac bracket. So that Mac bracket means get that hammer in first. It's not the normal order of operations on every AK platform out there, but on the AK-V it certainly is. So I'm going to look down. I can see daylight through the receiver, and that thing's just going to drop into place for me. So this feels good. This feels right. And then I'm going to take my nylon hammer and I'm just going to give it a couple taps. The key here, when I do that, and that feels pretty good, is that I want just enough of this pin out on this side that it grabs my fingernail. Perfect. And I do not want to be able to see daylight between the receiver and the pin on this side. That looks good. Okay. Now that's in place, and we can actually push the hammer all the way up, and it'll sit straight up, stay out of the way for us. Right after the hammer comes the trigger. The trigger is not as hard as you might think. I'm going to take my disconnector spring, I'm going to place it in the disconnector, and it'll actually just sit there without assistance. Then that small divot there in the back of the trigger itself, I can place the other side of that spring. So it's going to look somewhat like this. Now those holes should line up perfectly to offer you the ability to see daylight through them. See that? Wherever I move, you can see down through it. Perfect. That's what we want. That's how we have to get this into the receiver. So how do we do that? I like to take my support hand and put it inside the trigger guard and just allow it to actually brace the trigger and let it come all the way down and sit in there. And then again, we're kind of back to, we got to look and feel our way through this one. You line that up. Again, you might have to do a little wiggling for, lack of a scientific term. I don't know, I'm sure Mr. Geisley would have a better term for it, but you just kind of wiggle and turn it. And again, just hand pressure will be enough, and that should slide through. This is what it's going to look like. And what you're going to notice is that the pin Might be all the way through on the other side touching the receiver. Back it up just a little. Leave a little bit of that pin out so that we can get the next spring properly in place. So here's our next spring to put in place. That's going to go on to the trigger pin. Here's how we do that. Take pliers, grab the back leg of that spring, and remember, this is where my punch is going to come in handy. I'm going to use this as a slave pin to guide this spring. I'm going to come through the receiver and hold on to this spring in place and then push my trigger pin through. So I've used my pliers, I've gotten it in place. Now I'm using my punch. You'll notice I'm using my punch to hold that in place, kind of like a slave pin here. See that? Okay. And I need that back leg to rest over the trigger. So I'm going to get in with my hand and straighten that up. And once it's nice and straight, there we go, I'm going to go ahead and push that pin through, kind of applying downward pressure on the trigger itself, making sure everything stays in line. And again, it'll come out, there we go. You kind of hear it. It'll pop itself into place really without much force. Next is our pin keeper. And this guy is a great upgrade from the shepherd's hook that is traditionally found in AKs. That thing is a pain. This guy will save the day. Pin retainer, we call it the pin keeper around here just because we need to be a little different. You'll see how it lines up. If you match it to the left side of the receiver, you can see that it goes forward onto the hammer pin and down onto the trigger pin, and then the hole at the rear of it will line up with the hole at the rear of the receiver. Indexing with this finger here on the hammer pin, and I can move that pin keeper forward. I can see it, I can feel it. There, nice positive index into place. Come down, push it down over this rear one here. It should be flush against the receiver. You can look down and see that your holes are showing daylight through there. If you see there. All right. And then the last thing to do is get our safety into place. Super simple. We just push our safety right through there. All right. It goes through the pin keeper into the receiver. It's coming out over here. And then just push it down and into place. We'll take this shotgun shell out. We got our springs. These things are still active. Be careful. Pulling them up and off, and they'll actually snap down into place. Look down in there. That looks good. Okay, now we want to do a function check. We'll check our safety, make sure it works and engages the trigger the way it should, and then we got it. Just make sure. Check your reset as well. If those springs, if the hammer springs getting bent too much in one direction or the other, your reset might be problematic. You can just bend them back the way they should go. It's not a big deal. But that is that on the installation of the ALG AKT into the PSA AK-V. Find more tips, tricks, and how-tos at PalmettoStateArmory.com.